It was already over by the time anyone noticed. The bag had been sitting there since morning. No one touched it, not the joggers, not the fishermen, not the patrol that passed twice before noon. It rested where the tide stopped short, dry, undisturbed, waiting. Inside the bag was a diary, paper, cloth cover, corners softened by salt air. No name on the front, no markings, just weight. The kind you feel before you open something. The town logged the item at 2:14 p.m., found near the old steps, owner unknown, no urgency noted. By 2:16, it was already being treated as lost property. By 2:30, it was locked in a drawer. That drawer hadn't been opened in years. The tourist had arrived 3 days earlier. That much was clear. There was a receipt, a ticket stub, a guestbook signature at a boarding house that only filled during peak season. One line, careful handwriting, no flourish, just a date. The town remembered tourists. They always did, until they didn't. The diary didn't announce itself. No dramatic entry, no warning. The first page was plain. Arrived before noon. Wind stronger than expected. The water looks calm from far away, nothing more. The second page mentioned lunch. The third page mentioned the ferry schedule. Routine, unremarkable. The kind of details people forget. The kind that matter later. The town had a process for missing people. Forms, timelines, thresholds. Someone had to be missing long enough. Someone had to be reported. Someone had to be noticed. The tourist had none of those things. No family nearby, no local friends, no loud presence. Just a room key, just a bag, just a diary no one read. By evening, the weather shifted. Wind came inland. Waves climbed the rocks. The bag stayed where it was. The tide never touched it. That mattered, but no one wrote that down. The diary stayed in the drawer overnight. The town slept. Shops closed. Lights dimmed. The coast did what it always did. By morning, the tourist was officially overdue, not missing, just overdue. That word bought time. Time covers many things. At 9:07 a.m., someone finally opened the drawer. Not out of concern, out of inventory. The diary felt heavier now. Pages slightly warped, still readable. The handwriting steady, consistent. The entries didn't stop abruptly, they slowed. Shorter lines, fewer observations. The weather kept appearing. The water, too, always mentioned, always from a distance. One entry stood out. It was dated the same morning. The town said the tourist never returned from the shore. It read, "The steps are farther down than they look. Someone told me not to go alone. I think they were being careful. No alarm, no fear. Just hindsight forming on paper." The town timeline said the tourist was last seen at dusk. The diary placed them there at mid-morning. That difference was not flagged. It was ignored. The report stayed clean. Simple. Uncomplicated. Tourist presumed lost to the sea. That sentence was written before anyone searched. The search came later. Boats, binoculars, careful walking along the rocks. Nothing found. The town nodded. This happened sometimes. The coast was dangerous. The sea took people. That explanation fit. It always had. The diary stayed in the drawer for 3 weeks, then 3 months, then longer. The boarding house filled again. The room was rented. The guestbook page stayed. A name no one asked about, a line no one circled. When the diary surfaced again, it wasn't during an investigation, it was during renovation. A new clerk, a new lock. The drawer was emptied, forms tossed, keys returned. The diary ended up on a desk, open, accidentally. The clerk noticed the dates, the times, the consistency. They noticed something else. The handwriting never changed, not once. No shake, no rush, no final panic. That was strange. People don't disappear calmly. The town's official record said the tourist vanished in the evening. The diary proved they were alive well after sunrise. That difference sat quietly between the pages. Undeniable. Unannounced. Waiting. No one raised their voice, no one panicked. The clerk didn't call anyone. They copied a page, then another. Then compared it to the report. The timestamps didn't align. Not by hours. By an entire day. The diary was always there. It had been found, logged, stored, ignored. Not lost, not missing. Just unopened. Outside, the tide moved the same way it always had. The town went on. But something had shifted. Not loudly, not visibly, just enough. The diary ended mid-page. No final entry, no closure. The last line stopped halfway through a sentence. The ink faded where the hand must have lifted. There was no sign of struggle. Only interruption. The clerk closed the diary. Slowly. They didn't put it back in the drawer. They left it on the desk. That was the first break in routine. The first thing that hadn't been done the town's way. And for the first time since the bag washed ashore, someone understood. The tourists didn't vanish. They were misplaced. All right. We continue, slowly, carefully, exactly where the pressure begins to build. The diary didn't accuse anyone. It didn't need to. It just sat there. Open, quiet, impossible to ignore once seen. The clerk read it again, not searching for drama, just checking. Dates first, times next. Margins, spacing. Everything matched. Everything stayed consistent. There were no gaps, no missing days, no frantic changes. The tourist had kept time carefully, more carefully than the town had. The official report said the disappearance occurred at dusk. The diary placed the tourist at the lower steps at 10:42 a.m. That wasn't interpretation. It was written plainly. Ink pressed firmly. No hesitation. That meant the tourist had survived at least 8 hours longer than recorded. 8 hours that didn't exist on paper. 8 hours that no one had accounted for. The clerk pulled the incident log. Thin, bare. Standard language. Presumed lost to the sea. That phrase appeared often in coastal reports. It ended questions. It saved effort. It closed files. The clerk checked ferry schedules, morning crossings, midday crossings. The tourist had written about one leaving at noon. There was a note beside it. Too crowded. That ferry had departed full. Manifests were kept back then. Paper lists. Handwritten. The clerk requested them. It took 2 days. No rush was applied. No one sensed urgency. When the manifests arrived, the name wasn't there. Not misspelled, not abbreviated, not absent by error, just not listed, which meant the tourist hadn't boarded. That ruled out the water explanation. Not fully, but enough. The diary mentioned the steps again, several times, always the same location. Always cautious language, never fear. One entry read, "The locals don't like questions. They answer, but not fully." That line wasn't dramatic, it was observational. That made it worse. The clerk spoke to the harbor office, casually, just confirming dates, times, weather. The harbor records showed calm seas that morning. No advisories, no closures, no unusual tides. That didn't match the report either. The report mentioned rough waters. That was a default sentence, used often, copied frequently. Someone had filled in the blanks. Not maliciously, not emotionally, just efficiently. The clerk looked deeper. Property logs, camera coverage, old systems, partial archives. The steps appeared on one camera, only one. Low resolution, black and white. The timestamp was wrong by 3 hours. No one had corrected it. No one had needed to. The footage showed movement. A figure descending, stopping, turning, waiting. Another figure appeared briefly. Out of frame, not clear, not dramatic, but present. The footage ended there, not erased. Just overwritten by routine cycling. The clip existed because no one had bothered to delete it. The clerk froze the frame, printed it, pinned it behind the desk. That wasn't procedure. That was instinct. The diary mentioned a voice. Once. Only once. Someone said the tide turns faster here. No description, no gender, no threat. Just a warning. The town had no record of anyone stationed near the steps that morning. No patrol, no guide, no maintenance crew. But maintenance logs told a different story. Work had been scheduled nearby, canceled, rescheduled, then canceled again. Paperwork shuffled, dates altered, quietly. The clerk didn't accuse. They asked questions, soft ones. They noticed pauses, longer than necessary. They noticed answers that sounded practiced. Too clean, too fast. The diary didn't suggest danger, but it did suggest presence. Someone had been there, someone had spoken. Someone had known the tide. The town meeting minutes from that week were brief. Routine items, budget approvals. A note added at the bottom. Tourist incident resolved. No discussion, no debate, no vote. That wasn't how things usually worked. The clerk copied the minutes, then the logs, then the manifests, then the diary pages. Each piece alone said nothing. Together they leaned. The tourist hadn't vanished. They had been accounted for too quickly. The clerk took the diary home that night. That was the second break in routine. The town had rules. This crossed them. At home, the clerk noticed something new. The ink on the last page was darker, newer, as if written later. Not by much, but enough. The line cut off mid-word. Not because the page ended, because the writing stopped. That wasn't an accident. That was interruption. Outside, the tide changed. Inside, the timeline cracked. All right, we keep the pressure slow, quiet, unavoidable. The town looked calm in daylight. It always had. White railings, clean docks, tourist brochures printed on thick paper. Nothing sharp, nothing hidden. That was the first lie. Every coastal town had stories. This one just didn't tell them out loud. They lived in pauses, in warnings that stopped halfway, in directions given with extra care. The clerk started noticing it the next morning, the way people corrected themselves, the way they avoided the lower steps, not deliberately, just naturally, like avoiding a loose floorboard you learned about as a child. At the cafe near the harbor, the clerk listened. No questions, just ears. An older fisherman spoke about tides. He never named the place. He never had to. Some water pulls harder, he said. That's not weather. That's memory. No one laughed. No one asked what he meant. The diary stayed folded in the clerk's bag. Heavy, even when untouched. Town records from decades earlier were thin. Storm damage, funding repairs, missing documentation blamed on salt air. That explanation appeared often, too often. The clerk requested older land maps, not digital, paper. The kind stored in long drawers, the kind no one opened unless they had to. One map showed the steps, clearly marked. Another, older one didn't. The coastline shifted slightly, not by nature, by choice. A handwritten note sat at the corner. Not official, just a pencil line. Restricted access, safety concerns, no date, no signature. The clerk searched council archives, meeting notes from years ago. One agenda item appeared repeatedly. Lower access discussion. Always deferred. Always postponed. Always unresolved. The diary mentioned a plaque. Small. Unreadable from a distance. The clerk went to see it. The plaque existed. Weathered. Ignored. The letters barely visible, but still there. For those who entered the water and did not return, no names, no dates, just acknowledgment. That wasn't memorial. That was containment. The tourist had noticed it. They wrote about it. They had stood long enough to read it. That meant time. That meant safety. At least at first. The clerk asked about the plaque at the town office. The answer came too fast. Old marker, nothing official. The voice didn't rise, didn't shake. Just ended the conversation. A local teacher recognized the diary, not the person, the handwriting. It's careful, she said. Outsiders write like that. They don't rush. She paused, then added, they don't know what to skip. The clerk realized then. The town didn't hide events, it hid patterns. The steps had been mentioned before, in whispers, in older complaints, in a lawsuit settled quietly years ago. A boating accident, a fall, a missing hiker. Different stories, same location. The records labeled them separately. Different causes, different conclusions, but the timing always overlapped. Late morning, calm weather, clear visibility. The diary described someone standing near the railing, not threatening, just watching, not offering help, not leaving either. The clerk compared that to old witness statements, phrases repeated. I thought they worked there. They seemed to know the place. They said it wasn't safe to linger. That wasn't coincidence. That was role. The town had assigned someone, not officially, but consistently. Someone to redirect, someone to warn, someone to ensure no one stayed too long. The diary ended before that role could finish. The clerk returned to the steps at noon, the same time noted in the diary. The tide was low, the rocks exposed, the drop visible. It wasn't dramatic, it was deceptive. Standing there, the clerk felt it. The pull, not physical, mental. A sense that staying too long was a mistake. A voice spoke from behind. Careful there, calm, familiar. The clerk turned, an older man, maintenance jacket, no badge, no urgency, just presence. I'm fine, the clerk said. The man nodded, didn't leave, didn't move closer, just waited. That was when the clerk understood. The system was still active. The diary wasn't uncovering the past. It was interrupting the present. The man finally walked away. Slow, deliberate. The clerk waited until he disappeared, then stepped closer to the edge. There were marks on the stone. Old, worn, not slips, not accidents, handprints. The clerk stepped back, heart steady, hands shaking. This wasn't a dark secret. It was a managed one, a controlled risk, a town that chose silence over repair, routine over accountability. The tourist had stayed, asked, noticed, and that had broken the balance. The diary hadn't unlocked a mystery. It had reopened a responsibility. Good. We moved forward. Slowly. Nothing rushed. The final page wasn't torn. That mattered. If someone wanted to hide something, they would have removed it. This page was left behind. That was the mistake. The ink was lighter, not rushed, not panicked, measured. Written by someone who believed they still had time. The clerk read it once, then again. Not because it was unclear, because it didn't fit. There was a timestamp, precise, down to the minute. Later than the official time of disappearance. Later than the search reports. Later than the tide records. The tourist had written after they were supposed to be gone. The entry didn't describe fear. It described waiting. They wrote about the sound of flags snapping, about a child laughing somewhere above, about footsteps, not approaching, circling. They mentioned a voice, not threatening, not raised, just steady, telling them not to move, telling them help was on the way. That voice appeared nowhere in the police file, nowhere in witness statements, nowhere in the search timeline, because acknowledging it would mean acknowledging presence. The clerk checked the original report. Time of last confirmed sighting. Time search commenced. Time water units deployed. There was a gap. 18 minutes. Unaccounted for. The diary filled that gap. Quietly. Accurately. The clerk didn't bring the diary to the police, not yet. Institutions close ranks, when confronted directly. Truth needs error first. Instead, the clerk went to the local newspaper archive. Old clippings. Microfilm. Letters to the editor. There it was. A short column. Printed small, years ago. A reader asking why the lower steps remained open after multiple incidents. The response was official, carefully worded, no evidence of systemic risk. The tourist's entry contradicted that line completely, because they described instruction, guidance, control. Someone had taken responsibility, without accountability. The clerk noticed something else. The handwriting shifted slightly near the end. Not from fear, from cold. The tourist wrote about sitting, about being told standing was dangerous, about being assured someone was handling it. Handling what? The entry stopped mid-sentence. No punctuation, no closure. That wasn't panic. That was interruption. The clerk checked the weather records, wind steady, visibility clear, no sudden change, nothing that would explain a fall. The town had closed the case within days, ruled accidental, no further action. That speed had always bothered the clerk. Now it made sense. You close cases quickly when answers complicate operations. The clerk returned to the steps again. Same time, same tide, different awareness. The maintenance man was there again, same jacket, same posture, different eyes. This time, the clerk spoke first. I'm reviewing an old incident. No accusation, just fact. The man nodded. Slow, like he had waited years for someone to say that sentence. They always come back, he said. Not defensively, not proudly, just tired. The clerk didn't ask who, didn't need to. The man looked toward the water. They think it's beautiful, he said. And it is. Pause. Right until it isn't. The clerk asked one thing. Did anyone tell them to wait? The man didn't answer immediately. That was the answer. Finally, he said, We were told to keep people safe. We, the clerk repeated. Town, the man said. Not specifying, not apologizing. The clerk showed him the diary. Not the whole thing, just the timestamp. The man stared at it. Long, too long. That shouldn't be there, he said. Not angrily, not fearfully. Matter of fact. Why? The clerk asked. Because it means someone stayed, he said. And staying was never the plan. The clerk closed the diary. The wind picked up. Flags snapped. Just like the entry said. The case wasn't about a lost tourist. It was about a system that functioned until someone documented it. The diary had survived water, survived time, survived intention. Now it was asking something simple, to be read. Good. We continue. Slow pressure. No release yet. The memo existed. That was the problem. And it wasn't hidden well. It didn't need to be. No one was supposed to look for it. The clerk found it inside a box labeled Seasonal Maintenance, closed. Wrong category, wrong year, right handwriting. The memo was internal, stamped, initialed, reviewed, then rerouted. Not denied, not approved. Redirected. It outlined a pattern. Carefully, without emotion. 3 incidents, all near the same section of steps. All during similar tide conditions. All involving a pause, a wait, a delay. The language was clean, legal. Distance built into every sentence. Visitors advised to remain in place until water recedes. Staff instructed to minimize panic. No emergency escalation unless fall occurs. The memo ended with a recommendation. Short, clear. Consider signage revision to reduce public attention. Not fix the steps, not close the area, not warn people. Reduce attention. The clerk sat with that sentence. Read it again. Slower. The memo never reached the desk it was addressed to. It was marked received, then filed, then nothing. No signature rejecting it, no follow-up. Just silence. That silence wasn't accidental, it was procedural. The clerk checked the routing chain, names, initials, departments. One name appeared twice, once as reviewer, once as filer. Same person. 2 roles, 1 choke point. That was how the system protected itself. You don't erase truth. You redirect it until it loses momentum. The clerk recognized the name. Still active. Still employed. Promoted twice since the incident. The clerk didn't confront them. Confrontation alert systems tighten. Instead, the clerk traced the memo's origin. Who wrote it? A junior safety officer, temporary contract, no longer listed. The clerk searched employment records, exit reason, seasonal completion. Date, 2 weeks after the memo. No complaint filed, no appeal recorded, just disappearance. The diary entry mentioned footsteps, circling, not rushing. The memo described controlled delay. The two documents didn't contradict each other, they completed each other. The clerk copied the memo. Carefully, not digitally. Paper leaves fewer traces when handled correctly. At home, the clerk laid everything out. Diary, memo, search timeline, public statements. The official story leaned heavily on inevitability, sudden slip, unpredictable conditions. Unfortunate timing. The documents suggested management. The clerk noticed something else. The memo referenced Protocol 7B. That protocol wasn't public, but the index was. Protocol 7B, crowd stabilization during environmental risk, designed to prevent panic, designed to preserve reputation. The language avoided words like rescue, focused instead on containment. Containment of people, containment of perception. The clerk realized the tourist hadn't been lost. They had been managed, and management had limits. The clerk requested access to older town meeting minutes. Routine request, nothing alarming. Denied. Reason given, archival restoration. The clerk waited again, then visited in person. The archivist hesitated, long enough to confirm suspicion. These aren't requested often, the archivist said. The clerk didn't respond. Silence invites disclosure. They said no one would ever ask, the archivist added. That was enough. The minutes were handwritten, messy, rushed. One meeting stood out. Held days after the disappearance. Closed session. No transcript, only notes. One sentence was underlined. Hard. Deep. Maintain unified narrative. No debate. No dissent recorded. Just agreement. The clerk leaned back, exhaled. The diary hadn't exposed a crime. It had exposed coordination. That was worse. The clerk knew what came next. Once patterns surface, they don't stay contained. Someone else had noticed. Someone always does. The clerk wasn't alone anymore. They just didn't know who yet. Outside, the tide moved. Indifferent, consistent. The steps remained open. Still beautiful. Still dangerous. Still quiet. And somewhere in town, someone was waiting. Not for rescue, for exposure. Good. We move carefully now. This is where the town begins to react. She never raised her voice. That was why they underestimated her. Her name appeared in the margins, not the headlines, not the official reports, only in correspondence logs. She wrote letters, handwritten, addressed properly, dated, filed, every few months for years. Always polite, always brief, always asking the same question. Has any new information been found regarding my brother's disappearance? She signed every letter the same way. Full name, return address, careful handwriting. No anger, no accusation. Just persistence. The town answered twice, early. Form letters. Sympathetic tone. The investigation remains open. We regret the uncertainty. Then, the answers stopped. Her letters didn't. She sent one to the Transit Authority, one to the Coastal Safety Office, one to the Tourism Board. Different envelopes. Same question. She never demanded access, never threatened legal action, never contacted media. She trusted process. Process rewarded silence. The clerk found her name because she was listed as next of kin, primary. No secondary contact, no emergency replacement. She had traveled once, arrived in town quietly, stayed 2 nights, left without speaking to anyone publicly. The clerk found her hotel receipt, paid in cash, requested no housekeeping. She had visited the steps, stood there, longer than most. A local cafe worker remembered her. Because she tipped exactly, not generously, not poorly, precisely. She asked if the tide always came in that way, the worker recalled. She wasn't grieving loudly, she was mapping. The clerk tracked down her last known address. Another town, smaller, inland. The house still stood, painted, maintained. The clerk knocked. No answer. A neighbor appeared instead. Cautious, curious. She passed last year, the neighbor said. Peacefully. The clerk asked about the letters. She never stopped writing them, the neighbor said, even when her hands shook. The clerk asked if she ever talked about the town. She said they were waiting for her to forget, the neighbor said. She said she wouldn't. The clerk sat on the front steps, notebook unopened. The woman had never accused, never shouted, never demanded justice. She had simply refused to accept silence as an answer. Inside the house, the neighbor allowed the clerk to see one thing: a folder, neatly labeled. Inside were copies of every letter, and every response, and every non-response. The last letter had been returned unopened, stamped address unavailable. The clerk knew that wasn't true. The woman had known too. The final page wasn't a letter. It was a note, not addressed to anyone. If you are reading this, then the truth waited longer than I did. The clerk closed the folder. This wasn't obsession. It was patience weaponized. The town hadn't counted on time working both ways. Back in the archive, the clerk cross-referenced her letters with internal communication logs. Something shifted. Every time she wrote, an internal discussion followed. Not about the case, about exposure. Do we need to respond? Is silence better? Will this fade? It never did. Her persistence became a variable, an irritant, a risk. That was when Protocol 7B began appearing more often. Containment escalates when silence fails. The clerk realized something unsettling. The diary hadn't reopened the case. The woman already had. The town just didn't expect anyone to notice. The clerk wasn't exposing a past injustice. They were finishing a conversation the town had abandoned. Outside, the tide chart updated. Same patterns, same warnings, same steps. But now, there was a name attached to the waiting. Not just the lost tourist, the one who stayed behind. And someone in town knew this was coming. Because a file had been accessed that morning. One the clerk hadn't touched. Someone else was looking. Good. This is where the system closes ranks. They didn't call it an emergency. They never did. The email subject line was neutral. Administrative alignment session. No agenda attached, no meeting room listed, just a time, early, before tourists woke. The clerk wasn't invited. That mattered. Attendance was small, 6 names, all familiar, all long-tenured. They met in a room without windows. Not officially used anymore. The old planning annex. No recording device. No minutes taken. Phones left outside. That alone told the truth. One person spoke first. The harbor authority, voice calm, measured. There's renewed interest, they said. No explanation needed. Everyone knew. The tourism board representative nodded. The legal advisor didn't. This is not public yet, the legal advisor said, but it will be. Silence. Someone mentioned the diary, not by name. An artifact, they said. Circulating. The word artifact mattered. Objects can be dismissed. People can't. Another voice asked the question that always came last. Can we still contain this? No one answered immediately. The legal advisor finally spoke. Containment assumes there is nothing to contain, they said. That assumption is gone. The harbor authority shifted. This town survives on trust, they said. Tourism. Reputation. Another voice, older, quieter. The one who had been there longest. It survives on memory, they said. And ours is selective. That line landed. They discussed options. Language, framing, responsibility. They never used the word truth. They talked about impact. One person suggested an independent review. Not sincere, procedural. Another suggested releasing partial records. Curated. The legal advisor warned them. If this surfaces without us, they said, we lose control. Control was the only word that carried urgency. A vote happened, informal, unrecorded. 3 for limited disclosure, 2 for silence. 1 abstained. The abstention mattered most. The longest-serving member. The one who had once signed off on Protocol 7B. They didn't vote because they already knew the outcome. After the meeting, someone accessed the archive, not the clerk. They searched by tide date, by weather conditions, by transport schedules. They found the missing log, the one never digitized, a paper record, water-damaged, folded, a harbor maintenance report, time-stamped within minutes of the disappearance. It documented something that was never supposed to be documented. An obstruction, temporary, unauthorized, installed for a private event, removed before inspection. No public notice. No safety cordon. The report included a hand-drawn diagram, steps, tide, flow. Someone had signed it, initials only. The same initials appeared in the diary, written in frustration, written late, written small. The town had always known. They just believed no one else ever would. Outside the annex, morning arrived. Shops opened. Boats departed. Nothing looked different. But the meeting had shifted the balance. The clerk noticed the access log change, noticed the timestamp, noticed the user ID. The clerk didn't confront anyone, didn't alert media, didn't escalate. They did something quieter. They made a copy and uploaded it somewhere the town could not reach. Not publicly, not yet. Just beyond local jurisdiction. The system felt the pressure, even if it didn't know why. That night, someone attempted to retrieve the diary. The museum display case was intact, the label unchanged. But the diary was gone. Not stolen. Relocated. The tag read, removed for preservation review. Preservation of what or whom? The clerk went home, sat in the dark, listened to the tide reports. The truth was no longer buried. It was moving. And when truth moves quietly, systems panic. The journalist's inbox pinged at 3:17 a.m., a single encrypted file, no sender, no note. Curiosity burned brighter than sleep. They opened the file. Photos, logs, scans of the diary, handwritten pages. The first page, a sketch of the town's coastal pier, a small figure in a hood, half hidden. Initials scrawled faintly. ER. The journalist's breath caught. This wasn't just a diary. This wasn't just notes. This was proof. Proof that the town had hidden its own history. The story began to take shape. Title ideas, headlines. Abandoned diary of a lost tourist. Unlocks a coastal town's dark past. Every document corroborated another. Ferry logs, dock shift schedules, maintenance notes. The town's authorities had quietly erased the evidence. No one outside the archives would have known. But now someone did. The journalist worked fast. Encrypted backups, secure servers. Screens flickered in the dark. The first paragraph was ready. The next morning, the town woke to quiet disruption. Social media stirred first. Images of the diary, screenshots of the logs, snippets of the sketches. Locals whispered in cafes. Shopkeepers glanced at each other. Tourists still laughed, oblivious. But attention had settled, soft and slow. The council called a meeting. The mayor fumbled, papers in hand. Reports that had vanished now floated back into view. The journalist stayed off camera. The story moved on its own. The diary's voice, the erased record, the quiet sketches, all telling the truth. The town could no longer ignore it, and yet the journalist waited. Not for chaos, not for outrage, for understanding. Because this wasn't about punishment. It was about balance. The diary had opened a door. The town had to walk through it. And some would resist. Some would deny. Some would try to erase it again. But the diary didn't lie. The logs didn't lie. The sketches didn't lie. The truth would outlast all denial. Outside, gulls circled. The tide lapped at the pier. Inside, the journalist prepared to publish. A quiet click. A story released. The coastal town would never be the same. And the lost tourist, long forgotten, had finally been seen. The mayor's office smelled of old wood and fear. Papers shuffled, phones whispered, council members avoided each other's eyes. Who leaked it? One muttered. Another, how did this even surface? No one had answers. The diary, the tourists' sketches, the logs. They couldn't erase them again. Not now. The town square filled slowly that morning. People stood quietly, murmuring, reading printed copies posted in windows. Shopkeepers leaned out. Children tugged parents' hands. Everyone saw pieces of a history long hidden. Old rumors had circulated for decades. Whispers about vanished shipments, unexplained absences, forgotten names. Now the proof was in the open. Some locals stiffened, some wept. Some clenched fists at memories they wished to forget. The coastal pier, once quiet and benign, now carried weight. The journalist walked unseen among them, observing, noting. Screenshots on phones, photos in hands. Every face a study in recognition, in shock, in disbelief. One man stood by the pier, staring at the tide. He had known. He had hidden things. He clenched his jaw. A lifetime of secrets offered no comfort now. Across town, the council held an emergency session. Records once denied were finally acknowledged. Handwritten logs, shipping manifests, tourist complaints, all validated the diary's account. The coastal town had no choice but to confront its past. Some families came forward voluntarily. Some denied. Some simply disappeared from the discussion. But the diary's narrative could not be silenced. The lost tourist, whose voice had been erased for years, finally spoke through the pages. The town began to reckon, not loudly, not violently, quietly, reluctantly, inevitably. Truth, long buried, now pulled the town forward. And the journalist prepared for the next chapter, one that would show not just the past, but its living consequences. Outside, the gulls circled still. The tide lapped at the pier. History was no longer silent. The morning fog lingered over the town. A thin layer of salt clung to every surface. Inside one modest home, a woman unfolded a newspaper. Her hands trembled. Her father's name was on the list. Decades of quiet complicity now screamed from the page. She sank into a chair. The walls felt smaller, the air heavier. Down the street, another man packed a box. Old letters, old ledgers, photographs. He burned them all, not out of guilt, out of fear. Fear that truth had finally arrived. Meanwhile, the tourist's diary continued to circulate. Schools used it as a history lesson. Some families refused to send children. Some adults avoided conversation. Others clutched the pages, reading every word again and again. One retired dock worker went to the pier. The tide reflected his own regret. I kept quiet, he whispered to no one. The waves did not answer. A local businesswoman discovered her family's name, linked to smuggling. Her restaurant, her reputation, her life, everything tainted. She wept quietly in the kitchen. At the same time, a young couple walked through the town square. Their child pointed at the public boards with diary excerpts. "This happened here?" the child asked. The parents exchanged a glance. Yes, it had. Some locals started confessing quietly, anonymously leaving letters at the Historical Society. Small admissions, small truths. The diary had sparked a chain reaction. At the council chambers, a few members were suspended. Some resigned. Some faced charges that had been delayed for decades. The town's perfect image, so long curated, shattered silently. The tourist, unknown and absent, had changed the present. The diary was more than pages. It was a catalyst. Outside, the gulls continued their flight. The pier creaked, the tide moved in slow inevitability, and the town had no choice. It would rebuild on truth or crumble beneath it. The journalist typed late into the night. every keystroke a record, every line a testament to the power of an erased voice. The diary had done what no official report could. It had forced recognition, slowly, quietly, irrevocably. The meetings started quietly. No announcements, no banners, no cameras at first. Just rooms. Chairs pulled into circles. People who had avoided each other for decades, now sitting inches apart. The first apology came from an old fisherman. His voice shook. Not because he feared punishment, because he had lived too long with silence. He spoke about nights at sea, about boats that were not on any map, about money passed hand to hand. He spoke about looking away. Across the room, a woman clenched her coat. Her brother's name was in the diary, her father's signature beneath it. She did not speak. Not yet. Some apologies were accepted. Others were met with stillness, not anger, just distance. The diary had done something strange. It didn't demand forgiveness. It demanded acknowledgment. At the church, the pews filled for the first time in years, not for prayer, for testimony. A former dock clerk admitted to altering shipping logs. A council aide admitted to shredding documents. A school teacher admitted to teaching lies because the curriculum told her to. Each confession was smaller than the last, but together they formed something undeniable, a pattern. Outside, reporters waited, but most stories stayed inside those rooms, unrecorded, unfilmed, human. A memorial committee formed, not to honor heroes, but to list names, just names. Some families protested, others donated quietly. A few vandalized the early plaques at night. By morning, volunteers cleaned them, every time. At the Historical Society, the diary was placed behind glass. No dramatic lighting, no music, just a simple label. Recovered journal. Author unknown. Visitors leaned close. Some cried. Some stayed too long. Some left quickly. A young man traced a name with his finger. His grandfather's. He didn't smile. He didn't curse. He nodded, as if something heavy had finally settled. The journalist returned. Not for headlines, for closure. She walked the docks again. This time, no one turned away. They let her pass. She wrote one final piece, not about corruption, about consequence. She wrote about how the truth didn't arrive like a storm. It arrived like a tide, slow, unstoppable. The town council voted, old statues removed, new funding approved for education. Archives opened fully. Some former officials disappeared quietly, not chased, not celebrated, just gone. The town changed, not overnight, not cleanly. But when tourists came now, they were told the full story. Not the polished one, the real one. And somewhere beyond the water, a life that had once been erased had finally been heard. The diary remained, silent, patient, complete. No one ever learned who the tourist was, but no one forgot what they left behind. Silence followed, and the town let it stay.